Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a detailed look at captaincy ahead of Game Week 12. I usually put this in the Game Week preview video, but I just fancy doing an entire video dedicated to it, especially as we think Salah's got a slightly trickier fixture than usual and there are some really good alternatives. So if you do enjoy a more detailed look at captaincy and you want me to do this at some points in the future, obviously I won't be able to do it every week, but at some points in the future, let me know by liking. I know then that you like the content, and comment down below if you do like this detailed approach to captaincy. But without further ado, let's jump into today's video. You guys know what time it is. Before we jump into the video, just wanted to give a massive shout out to the sponsors, OneFootball. If you're new to this channel, you've only watched a few of the videos, OneFootball are essentially the best free football app on the market. They have every single thing you need in one place, whether it be stats, transfer news, injury news, press conference updates. They have it all. And the main thing that I use it for is during the weekend, especially like this weekend when I'm a little bit busy, I have live notifications on. If I can't watch the football or for the 3 p.m. games, it all comes to my phone. I can know who got the goal, who got the assist straight away, and I can look at the stats, the live ticker to see up-to-date commentary. It's basically perfect if you can't catch the football or for a summary after the games as well. And as you can see on the screen, I've been keeping up to date with all of the international break games as well, which has been really useful to know about injuries, playing time, etc. So if you want to get the best free football app on the market or you just want to support the channel, you can do so for free by scanning the QR code or clicking the link in the description. Download OneFootball, and if you do so, let me know what you think of it. So for those of you that have followed me for a while, you will know that my day job is a lecturer in sports psychology. So at risk of making this sound like one of my lectures, I just wanted to quickly tell you the sort of order that we're going to run through today, just so that you know what to expect. And for those of you that can't watch every single minute of these videos, I know you like to skip to the chapters. So just so you know what you're skipping to and what you would have missed if you've skipped that section. So we're going to start by looking at the individual data from Game Week 1 to Game Week 11 for the top captaincy candidates for the coming week. So we're going to be looking at like expected data, big chances, etc. We're then going to take a look at individual player touch maps from Game Week 1 to 11 for the top captaincy candidates, which will give you an idea of what sort of positions they're picking up and whether that is ideal for your captaincy shouts. We're then going to move on to team data, both from an attacking perspective of the team that the player plays for. So for Salah, it would be Liverpool's underlying data. And we're also going to look at the defensive data of the team they're playing, which is essentially, is the fixture a good one to target? We're then going to take a look at something which we haven't done before. We're going to head over to Fantasy Football Scout and take a look at goal attempts conceded maps for Arsenal, Leeds and Watford, which is, of course, Salah, Son and Kane, and then Ronaldo. We're then going to take a look at chances created conceded maps for Arsenal, Leeds and Watford as well, which tells us a little bit about where these teams are conceding most of their chances from. And then we're going to conclude with who is the best choice. And we're going to look at a captaincy Venn diagram, which is a bit of a way that I like to work out who I'm captaining each week. So that's what to expect for the upcoming video. If you want to skip to the sections, you can feel free to do so. I would recommend watching throughout because we're going to build a narrative slowly. Without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, as I said, starting with the individual attacking stats from Game Week 1 to Game Week 11 for the top captaincy candidates. So the people that I've chosen this week, or the players that I've chosen to be in this video, are Salah, Ronaldo, Kane, Son, Foden, Antonio, Cancelo, Trent and James. Of course, there are other options in and around this. You could potentially go for someone like Armstrong against Norwich. You could go for Tony or Mboma against Newcastle. There are other options, but the rest of the players that aren't on this list, I either think they're rotation risks, their team isn't very good. So someone like, you want to pick someone from like Burnley, particularly because you just don't want to really rely on them to score points, or the underlying individual data isn't good enough. So these are the players that I will be choosing from this week for the armband. Obviously, some I favour over others, which we will discuss when I give my opinion on it. With respect to which individual underlying attacking stats we're going to look at, it's the same as every other captaincy discussion we've had. So we've got goals and assists per 90, which gives you an idea of their actual output. Touches in the box per 90, which gives you a bit of an idea about their involvement in and around the box, which is where they're most likely to score and assist. Then we've got non-penalty expected goals per 90. Of course, penalties do matter, and some of these players are on penalties, such as Salah and Kane. However, you can't really predict penalties, and as such, it's better to look at stats without them. And also, there have been less penalties this season, so I wouldn't necessarily want to rely on those underlying statistics. We've then got expected assists per 90 for creativity, which then brings us all together for expected goal involvement per 90, of course non-penalty. And then the last column is expected FPL points per 90, which is a metric that takes into account pretty much everything, puts it all together and spits out one expected FPL points per 90 for the first 11 game weeks, which I really like. Really nice feature over at Fantasy Football Fix. So that's what we're looking at. With respect to the colour scheme, Bright green means it is the best stat of all of the options there. Slightly faded green means it's sort of second, third, and then very faded is sort of third or fourth, fifth. There's not really a scientific approach to this, but it just gives you an idea when you glance at it. If you're on your phone and you can't see all the numbers, it will just give you an idea of which players are performing very well in all of these underlying stats. So the obvious thing to note straight away, and it is the same every week, is that Salah has the best underlying stats in the league. Now, you didn't need to watch this video for me to tell you that, but it is worth noting that consistently he is doing very well. What I would say is in past weeks, he's been top for every single underlying stat. However, in recent weeks, his stats have dropped off marginally, and it means that some players are performing slightly better in some of these underlying stats. So I wouldn't say that Salah is leagues ahead in every single thing, but if you take them as a whole, he is incredibly impressive. Touches in the box is what always strikes me. He's always over 9 touches in the box per 90. Sometimes he's as many as 13 or 14 in a single game. And that's just highly impressive that he's getting involved that much. And we'll see that in the touch maps in a second. Again, his expected goal involvement is always remarkably high at 0.92. He's almost expected to get an FPL return every single game, which is incredible. And 8.08 expected FPL points per 90 is also really highly impressive. So, yes, Salah is the best player in the league. He's arguably the best player in the world at the moment. His underlying stats are the best in the league. And once again, you didn't need me to tell you that, but I can confirm that for you, that if you don't really take a look at underlying stats, Salah is the real deal this season. Outside of that, there are a few players that are really still impressive. Antonio is one that we see. I guarantee that not many people will be considering Antonio for the armband this week because he's blanked a few of the recent games. West Ham have still looked good, but Antonio sort of assisting the assister, and he hasn't looked as deadly as he did earlier on in the season. And yes, some of these underlying stats are skewed because he did so well in the first 3 or 4 games, but they're still really, really good. And I discussed Antonio last week when people were deciding whether to sell him, and I said I wouldn't sell him because even in the last 5 game weeks, his underlying stats have still been some of the best in the league. And yes, his fitness will be tested over the coming period, but if we're talking about just captaincy this week, the underlying stats are still good enough to consider him. Touches in the box is the second best on this list at 6.73. Non-penalty expected goals is the third best on this list at 0.51. Even his creativity is the fourth best on this list at 0.29 for expected assists. That means that his non-penalty expected goals and expected assists per 90 is the second best on this list at 0.80. It's almost as good as Salah's, which is really, really incredible considering how cheap he is. His expected FPL points per 90 isn't that high. It's still sort of 4th, 5th best on the list. The reason is strikers don't get the extra point for a goal and they don't get the extra point for an expected clean sheet. So they tend to have lower expected FPL points than midfielders and defenders because they don't get those clean sheets. They don't get the extra points for goals. So it's worth taking that into account. But what I would say is that Antonio's underlying statistics are highly impressive and you should at least, based on just the individual underlying stats, consider him for the armband this week. Outside of that, there are 2 other players that I just wanted to really draw your attention to. Ronaldo is the first one, who is still putting up pretty good underlying statistics. Similarly to Antonio, his first few games, Ronaldo, have definitely skewed this. I think his non-penalty expected goals and expected assists was something like 1.61 in that first game against Newcastle. So those first few games when he sort of hit the ground running definitely skewed this, and it's definitely made them look better than they are. But he's still putting up some pretty decent numbers. He's got the highest non-penalty expected goals per 90 on the list here. So he's getting enough chances. His goal threat's still really good. Touches in the box still highly impressive at 6.01. His non-penalty expected goal involvement, therefore, is the third best on this list. So whatever you want to say about Manchester United, and we'll discuss Manchester United in the next section, Ronaldo is still getting chances. He's still picking up the right positions. He's still got high goal threat. He's still getting a lot of big chances, which isn't on this list, but he's still getting a lot of those big chances. So for me, I wouldn't disregard Ronaldo just because Manchester United haven't looked great recently, because what this tells me is that even when Manchester United aren't clicking, Ronaldo will get chances. And with a captaincy, all you need to bet is in this one game against Watford, Manchester United will click. I quite fancy taking that bet, if I'm being honest. And if so, Ronaldo's stats when Man United aren't playing well are fantastic. What will they look like when Manchester United are playing well, when they can feed him and they get a few crosses into him? So I think that's highly promising for Ronaldo. And I would say Ronaldo arguably has the third best underlying stats on this list after Salah and Antonio. The fourth player that I wanted to talk about is Reece James. I put Cancelo, Trent and James on here because they're so good at the moment. And I know a lot of managers like to take risks on captaining defenders. I personally don't really like it. The reason is because one lapse in concentration from anyone. It could be that Rudiger slips over and that causes Chelsea to lose their clean sheet, or a freak incident where the ball goes through Alisson's hands and Trent loses his clean sheet. It doesn't even have to be the player you're captaining. Just a random lapse in concentration or a wonder goal from the halfway line and you've lost your clean sheet, and then you're relying on an attacking return. But I've put the 3 there just to show you how they compare. And as you can see, Trent and James in particular have better underlying stats than a lot of these attackers. I would say that James and Trent have better underlying stats than Foden, Son and Kane, arguably, for different reasons. But James in particular, really impressive. Goals and assists per 90, he's in the top 2 for actual output. Touches in the box, he gets 5.11 touches in the box. That is better than Kane, Son, Cancelo, Trent. It's approaching what Foden, Antonio and Ronaldo put out. He's getting so many touches in and around the box. Non-penalty expected goals at 0.23. That is significantly higher than Ivan Toney's of 0.14. He's got really good attacking goal threat. His expected assist is the second best on this list at 0.36. Only Trent Alexander-Arnold can beat him for creativity there. That means that his non-penalty expected goal involvement is the 4th best on this list, just behind Phil Foden. And his expected FPL points per 90 is the best on this list at 8.90. It's one of the best in the Premier League as well. The reason for that is really high expected clean sheet chances with Chelsea recently, good goal threat, good creativity, and he gets the extra point for those goals as well. So Reece James should be considered every week for captaincy. He really can. If you think that he's going to start and you think the fixture is a good one from a clean sheet perspective, at the moment, until I see a decrease in Reece James' output, he should definitely be considered. And if you're a Maverick manager, I definitely don't mind it. And the same for Trent as well. I really, really like Trent's underlying stats. Such high creativity. And we'll discuss it in the final section when we look at chances created, conceded from Arsenal. It looks like Trent could be in for a really, really good game because of where Arsenal can concede their chances from. But anyway, they're pretty much the ones I wanted to draw your attention to. Salah and Antonio, fantastic underlying stats. Ronaldo's are still really good considering Manchester United haven't been that great recently. And Trent and James are really, really good. Cancelo's stats aren't bad, but they're just not quite as good as Trent's and James. And Kane and Son, we know that their underlying stats aren't great, but you could say that it's almost not worth considering them because they're going to play completely different roles under Antonio Conte. So it's up to you how much weight you want to give to these underlying stats. But Kane and Son's are average at best. I would argue slightly worse than average. And Foden's are really good. I haven't considered him here massively because he doesn't rank very highly on any in particular apart from touches in the box and his actual expected goal involvement. But an expected goal involvement of 0.60, I think that's really, really impressive. And I would not mind someone captaining Foden. I said in my previous video that I didn't think Foden would start. Now that Jack Grealish and Kevin De Bruyne haven't been pictured in training, I would argue that really boosts Foden's chances of starting. So if we get any inkling that Foden will start, or if you're just confident he will, I really don't mind him based on these underlying stats. He gets very involved inside the box, really good expected goal involvement. I think there are definitely worse options than Phil Foden this week. So for me, just based on underlying stats, I would captain Salah or Antonio, and then I would say outside shots for James, Trent and Foden. What we're going to now take a look at is individual touch maps to just give you an idea of where these players are picking up the ball. So because I probably couldn't show every single touch map for all of the players we just considered, I've just chosen what I think will be the top 4 choices this week. If you was to run a poll, I think these would be the top 4. There's reasons for that. They've shown consistently in the past they perform well. They have shown in the past or currently that they've got good underlying statistics. And also they're at a premium price. And this is a whole different debate, maybe for a Psychology 101 video, but I think people tend to feel a little bit more comfortable captaining someone of a high price. So these are the 4 that I've chosen to look at. Really interestingly, I would say that Son, Kane and Ronaldo's touch maps are relatively similar, and then Salah just stands out as having a completely different one. We'll start with Salah because it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Every single week I say it's ridiculous. It's literally the perfect touch map for a right winger. He does stay very wide. As you can see, he's almost got red the entirety of that touchline, but he cuts in on the left. He doesn't just stay wide. And he really, really picks up those perfect positions in and around the edge of the box just to the right. And what he's done this season, even more so than past seasons, he's getting into the box even more. As we can see, we saw it in the individual stats section. I think it was like something like 9.27 touches in the box per 90. You can see he's not just staying wide and he is getting a lot more touch in the box. Even centrally, look at those touches in and around the penalty area. Those aren't just penalties. Those are actual touches. And I think we've noticed this. He's picking the right times this season to get inside the box. And it's just making him so, so deadly. And like I said, I would argue that is the perfect touch map for a right winger. So that only emphasizes that Salah is an incredible captaincy option every single week. Outside of that, we'll start with Son, actually, because I really like Son's touch map. It's so consistent across left to right. You would expect potentially that it would be more so on the left, but he's just so energetic. He's so talismanic for that Spurs side. I would argue he's even more talismanic than Kane. And he just picks up the ball wherever Spurs need him. And the other thing that I like about Son, you can see both corner flags. He's taking a lot of corners for Tottenham. And I really like that. Lots of corner taking means more chances to create chances. as well as the goal threat that we know Son has. And remind me, I'm mental note to myself to discuss this when we get to the chances created conceded from Leeds. Leeds concede a lot of chances from corners, and Son is taking a lot of corners for Spurs. So that's potentially something to look out for. But that's a really nice touch map from Son. I would like to see him getting into the box a little bit more, but you can see a lot of touches in and around the edge of the box. And I would argue that's the same for Harry Kane. Very similar-ish touch map to Son, not getting into the box quite as much, and he doesn't have corners. Obviously, he is a threat from corners, but for me, looking at these touch maps, looking at the underlying stats, you would say that Son is the one that stands out as being the slightly better captaincy option so far. But Conte's come in and it could completely change that. So again, I don't know how much you guys want to look at this. I didn't just want to look at the ones from last week because that's not enough data. But I would argue just looking at this, because of the corners and because a few extra touches in the box and in and around the box as well, I would argue that Son's touch map is slightly better. And then Ronaldo at the end, not taking as many touches as the likes of Salah, but he is getting into the box a lot, more so than Son and Kane. And I just really like his touch map. Again, as we've said in the past, he's got that natural tendency to drift out to the left. And because sometimes Cavani will come on up top or Rashford will play alongside him, he does drift out to the left a little bit, but he's still getting enough touches in the box, over 6 touches in the box per 90. So I really, really like that. Of course, he doesn't take corners, but he is a massive threat from corners. So those are the touch maps. Of course, Salah stands out as being the leader here. Son and Kane's aren't bad. I would want to see them getting into the box a little bit more under Conte, and I still really like Ronaldo's, even though he doesn't get that many touches off. Let me know any of these touch maps you really like. The likes of, James, Cancelo, and Trent are absolutely ridiculous. You can look at those yourself over at Fantasy Football Fix. They look almost like right wingers, but of course, I know it's an added risk, captain and defender. So we've just taken a look at the top 4 captaincy options here. I love Salah's touch map. So guys, we've discussed the individual underlying data of those captaincy options. What we're now going to discuss is the team data from an attacking perspective. So for example, for Salah, you've got Liverpool's underlying data from an attacking perspective here. And then the last 4 columns, you've got the defensive data of the team they're playing, which is why you can see the badges just there next to me. That is the team that they're playing. If the badge is circled in green, it means it is a home fixture for that captaincy option. So you can see Arsenal is in green because it's a home fixture for Salah. And then Leicester, for example, is circled in red because it's an away fixture for someone like Havertz or James for Chelsea. So, as I said, the first 4 columns is the attacking data of the team they play for. So what you can see straight away, and sorry, just to explain, the brackets is where they are in the league. So as you can see, Liverpool are first in the league for all 4 of those underlying statistics from an attacking perspective. So they are first for goals per 90, first for non-penalty expected goals per 90, first for shots in the box per 90, and first for big chances per 90. They're actually first for every single stat I could find. There's not a single one that anyone ranks above them for that I could find anyway. So Liverpool are literally the best team from an attacking perspective in the league by some distance as well. Outside of that, which is pretty obvious, you'd expect Liverpool to be the best in the league. Outside of that, I would argue that Chelsea, United, City and West Ham are probably the next 4 best teams. So I would argue that Liverpool, Chelsea, United, City and West Ham are the best 5 attacking teams in the league this season, which is really nice because they are the captaincy options that we're choosing from. So I'd argue you can't really go wrong from an attacking perspective in choosing anyone from Liverpool, Chelsea, United, City and West Ham. Yes, obviously Liverpool are that good that you would favour them. But even someone like Manchester United, you can see here, goals per 90, they're 5th in the league. Non-penalty expected goals per 90, they're 6th in the league. Yes, they've had some good fixtures, but they're still really, really good. Shots in the box, they're still taking almost 10 shots in the box per 90. Big chances, they're still getting around 2.36 big chances per 90, which is the 4th best in the league. Chelsea are, I would argue, probably the 2nd or 3rd best attack in the league. City is probably the 2nd or 3rd best attack in the league as well. And West Ham have been attacking really well as well. You can see they're ranked 3rd for goals per 90, 3rd for shots in the box per 90. They're even 4th for non-penalty expected goals per 90. So from an attacking perspective, I really don't think you can go wrong with captaining a player from Liverpool, Chelsea, United, City or West Ham. Where I would argue you can go wrong, at least basing this on the data under Nuno, which of course probably isn't that accurate, is that Spurs have been horrific. They are 19th for goals per 90, 16th for non-penalty expected goals per 90, 19th for shots in the box per 90, and 16th for big chances per 90. So we are going to need to see a big transformation from Conte. And I will be honest, it's starting to put me off Kane and Son. The reason for that is that, are we expecting him to just flip this that quickly? Are we expecting more of a gradual change? Are we expecting him to start getting a few more big chances, then start getting a few more again? Or are we just expecting him to flip from one game to the next? I don't know the answer to that. I don't think anyone truly knows the answer to that. But what I would say is they have been horrific this season from an attacking perspective. So, like I said, Any of the other 5 teams, I think you're fine. I would say that Liverpool are highly impressive. 13.27 shots in the box. When you consider how many touches in the box Salah's getting, and you consider how many shots in the box Liverpool get off, it could be an absolute field day for the likes of Jota, Salah, Mane. Every single game, they're going to get chances in and around the box. It doesn't matter who they're playing against. They are going to get those chances. But Chelsea, United, City, and West Ham have also been highly impressive as well. If we then take a look at the fixtures, I mean, it is what you would expect in that I would say that Watford have probably got the worst defensive data here. You can see that goals conceded, Watford are 17th in the league, 18th in the league for expected goals conceded per 90, and then expected clean sheets per 90, they are 18th. The only thing that Watford aren't terrible at is they don't concede that many shots in the box. They actually concede quite a few shots outside the box. So that might suit Ronaldo and his long shots, or Bruno potentially, but they are still conceding 8.73 shots in the box, which is still a decent amount. Outside of that, Leeds have the second. Well, you would say that Leeds is the second best fixture here out of the 6 possible fixtures, which is, I guess, what you would expect. Leeds is definitely a fixture that you can target. They rank 15th for goals conceded, 17th for expected goals conceded, almost as bad as Watford, only 0.01 worse than Watford. So you would argue it's still a really good fixture. 15th for shots in the box conceded, which is really nice for the likes of Kane, who we know like to take shots in the box, and 15th for expected clean sheets per 90. So, yeah, I would say fairly obvious. Watford and Leeds are the fixtures to target here. However, I would say I was quite surprised how bad Leicester and Arsenal's data have been. I thought they'd been a little bit better. Leicester in particular, lots of shots in the box conceded per 90, which might suit the likes of a Kai Havertz. And I'm looking to sell Kai Havertz this week. But this data is making me really second guess whether it's worth selling Havertz, especially as we know Lukaku is now out for this week. Kai Havertz is almost definitely going to start up top. This data looks promising. It might even look promising for a potential Kai captaincy. I didn't put him on the list because his underlying data is still really poor, but you could take the punt on it, definitely. What I would say, and I want to make this explicitly clear, is this would suggest that Everton's defensive data is really strong over the season, and it would suggest that Arsenal's defensive data is mid-table, slightly weaker than mid-table as well, for expected goals conceded per 90 at least. If you was to look at the most recent set of games, Arsenal's defensive data is significantly better, and Everton's defensive data is significantly worse. Also, Everton have really nice fixtures as well. So you do need to take a little bit of context with this. However, I didn't just want to take a look at the underlying data from the last few weeks because it's a very small sample size. So what I would say is, over the season, Everton have been pretty good defensively. Arsenal have been pretty average. If you look more recently, Arsenal have actually been pretty decent and Everton have been really poor. So it depends what you're looking for when you're looking at underlying data. Do you want to look at more recent form under a smaller sample size, or do you just want to take a huge sample size because then you can start drawing trends? Over the season, Arsenal have been average, so it's not a bad fixture at all for Salah. Over the season, Everton have actually been pretty decent, so it may be not a great fixture for Foden. But if you switch that, you would say, actually, maybe it's not a great fixture for Salah, and maybe it is actually quite a nice fixture for Foden, Jesus, whoever it is you want to captain from Man City. So I'll leave that open to your interpretation. The only thing that I would say here is quite explicit is that Wolves have been very, very solid defensively this season. Recently, it's not quite as great, but still, no matter which way you look at it, I don't think that Wolves is a fixture to target. So that might put me off of Antonio, because even though West Ham have attacked really well recently, even though Antonio's stats are really good, I'm not sure that when there are fixtures such as Leeds and Watford to target, that I would want to be going for Wolves, especially when you've got Salah in such great form. So that might put me off of Antonio. This might put me off slightly from Foden and Jesus, especially as we just don't know who's going to start, because this could be a fixture that rotation's quite heavily involved in. So it would probably then put me down to maybe, again, Salah, Ronaldo, and then Kane and Son based on this stuff. Let me know down below if this changes your opinion. Obviously, Liverpool are amazing. Salah's amazing. For the fixtures, I would target Watford. I would target Leeds. You probably didn't need me to present the data to show you that, but here it is just in case you needed any confirmation or proof of what you're thinking in your head. So what we're going to do this section is we're going to switch over to Fantasy Football Scout, which I don't usually do, but they've got a really nice little section which tells you where teams are conceding shots from, where they're conceding chances from. And that sometimes helps when you're trying to choose a captain. Because, for example, if Arsenal conceding lots of shots from where Salah will take shots from, that's really nice, and you can look at that. So the first set of maps is goal attempts conceded. This is a really straightforward one. Where are they conceding attempts on goal from? What I would say is that these tend to all be clumped around the same spot, and you don't tend to learn that much from this, but there is definitely some clear trends here, and it starts to paint a picture of who you might want to captain. So, starting with Watford, most of their shots are conceded in and around the box. There aren't that many towards the edge, slightly more to the left, and slightly more just outside the box. So I would argue that, yes, this is fantastic for Ronaldo. We know he takes most of his shots in the box, but when he doesn't, he's out and slightly to the left. That's like a classic Ronaldo shot to take. It might also favour someone like Rashford if he starts, but generally speaking, you can't really draw too much from this, I wouldn't say. They get conceding a lot of their goal attempts from the centre, slightly to the left. So, yeah, I would say that favours Ronaldo slightly. Arsenal's a really interesting one. I think this is slightly... If anything, this doesn't make me favour Salah. They're not conceding many shot attempts at all from that right side of the box. You can see most of them are either dead central or towards the left. So for me, I would actually say this might favour someone like Jota or Mane, depending on whoever's playing out on the left. Probably Mane in particular is going to get a few shot chances here, based on this data at least. This is suggesting that Arsenal are conceding a lot of their shots from the left, but most of them, again, are pretty central. And then Leeds in particular are conceding a lot of central attempts. And you can see they're conceding a lot of shots from right outside the box, but also centrally as well. So I would say this favours both Son and Kane, but potentially Kane slightly more because there are a lot of them are dead central. This is a lot of interpretation, right? It might be that we're overthinking this, but I think the one in particular that is striking me here is definitely Arsenal, in that they're conceding more of their chances towards like where Mane would take shots and where Jota might take shots, as opposed to Salah. But Salah is world class. He'll create chances to score anyway, so maybe you take this with a pinch of salt. If we just then skip over to the next set of maps, this is chances created conceded maps. So what this tells you is where are they conceding chances created from? Right, so this isn't goal attempts. This is where are people, or where are players creating chances from when they're playing against these teams. So straight away, what you can see with the Watford one is that Watford are conceding a lot of chances from the left, which is really interesting. So in and around that sort of position where you could see Ronaldo taking a few pops. And they're also conceding a lot of corners from the right-hand side. So like an in-swinging Luke Shaw corner, something like that. What this tells me is that, again, it might be a pretty decent fixture for Ronaldo, because they're conceding a lot of chances from the corner flag. You can see there's a big red dot there, and Ronaldo is so impressive from corners. Again, I wouldn't draw that many conclusions from this, because the rest of it, they're sort of conceding chances from all over the place. So I don't think, again, there's that many conclusions to draw from that. Once again, the real reason I wanted to show you this is because it's really interesting for the Salah captaincy debate. You can see here, you won't be able to see my mouse where I'm looking at, but imagine where Salah picks up the ball, where all of Salah's touches are. We just looked at his touch map. You can see that is where Arsenal are conceding all of their chances, right in and around that edge of the box on the right-hand side, where Trent and Salah are picking up the ball. So you can interpret this two ways, and I'll tell you both ways, and I'll tell you the way that I'm probably interpreting this. The first way you can interpret this is that this will favour Mane and Trent, because Arsenal are conceding lots of chances created from that area where Trent picks up those beautiful positions and whips in those sort of delicate early crosses, those sort of crosses where he whips it into the back post towards Jota and Mane. So you could say that because they're conceding a lot of chances created from those positions, that will favour Trent, that will favour Mane and Jota to arrive at that back post for headers and volleys. And I discussed this with Tom, one of my friends. He's on Twitter, Tom_Connect, I think his account is. He said that he thinks that this would mean that it would favour Trent and it would favour Mane and Jota. And I would argue that you probably can't really argue against that. That makes a lot of sense. The other way you can look at it is that Arsenal are conceding a lot of space and a lot of opportunities in the area where Salah picks up the ball. That is another way of looking at it. Because if they're conceding chances created from that area, it means they are offering a little bit of space and time to players in that area. If you give Salah the ball in that area, he can score from there. And he can create chances as well, but he can score. And that is the difference between if you gave someone like Dan James the ball there or Salah the ball there, it's a completely different ball game altogether. So there are two ways you can look at it. You can look at this will favour Trent and this will favour Mane and Jota, in which case you might want to bring in Jota and you might want to captain Salah or Mane. Or you can look at it as Salah might get a little bit of space here because they're not very defensively solid on their left-hand side. Let me know down below how you interpret this. Either way, I would say that no matter what happens, Arsenal probably know this and they will probably try and crowd Salah. So it might be that this isn't the way that the Liverpool-Arsenal game goes, and it might be a completely different dynamic, in which case it might be more space for Robertson and Salah arriving at the back post, or more space for Mane to shoot. It might be completely different. But what I would say is it's really interesting that they're conceding most of their chances created from where Salah and Trent pick up the ball, and they're conceding most of their goal attempts from when Mane and Jota will pick up the ball and Robertson will pick up the ball. The final one is Leeds. Again, very, very central where they're picking up their chances created conceded. It's an absolute mouthful to try and spit that out, which means that probably Kane might have the opportunity to create a little bit from that central role. And you can see where Kane drops deep centrally is where they are conceding a lot of their chances. So it might be that Kane slides through Son a little bit in this game. Either way, I think this definitely plays into the idea that Kane and Son are nice captaincy options because all of their goal attempts and chances created conceded is very central. Leeds don't let a lot happen in their wing-back positions, the likes of Luke Ayling and Dallas or Shackleton, whoever's playing in those positions. They concede so many chances, goal attempts, chances created conceded through the centre. So the fixture really is set up for Kane and Son. It does look really nice from them from a fixtures perspective. Let me know if you thought this was a bit of an interesting discussion. As I said, I think this probably plays into the fact that Salah will get some opportunities, whether it's from a creation point or whether it's from a goal point. It depends on your interpretation of it. And this sort of drives home the point that Kane and Son are going to get opportunities, whether it's to create goals or whether it's to score goals. The centre of that park is just so open. The final thing I want to say, and Andy Martin really picks up on this really well on Twitter, and I'm sure Leeds fans will be thinking this. I would argue that if Calvin Phillips had been playing all season, every single game, it wouldn't quite look like this because they are a lot more defensively solid in the centre of the park when Calvin Phillips is fit. So do take that into account. As far as I know, Calvin Phillips is fit this weekend, and that would definitely make me less certain that Kane and Son will get those opportunities because Calvin Phillips just fills that space and therefore they start having to look a little bit wider, the teams that Leeds are playing against. I do apologise, this isn't my best graphics work. I've been in a bit of a rush this morning. Trying to do all of this work is taken hours and hours last night, this morning as well. So this isn't my best graphics work, but this is almost what I do in my head when I'm trying to decide on a captain. And I just thought I'd sort of put it onto paper and make it a way that you guys will understand what I'm thinking about when I'm trying to decide my captain. So I would argue that the three things that you're looking for when you're choosing a captain is how good is their individual data, how good is their team data from an attacking perspective, and then how good is the fixture. And ideally, in an ideal world, you will have all three of those, and then you've got a clear captaincy choice. This week, I would argue that there is no one that really stands out as being perfect in all three. And there are some that you could argue could be in all three, potentially in two, potentially in one. But this is what I'm thinking about when I'm going through it. So you can see in the fixture Venn diagram. So if you don't know what a Venn diagram is, if they're in sort of their own circle, it means they are good for that one. If they're in the overlapping ones, it means they're good for both those. And if they're in right in the center, it means they are pretty good for all three of these different categories. So hopefully most of you will see Venn diagrams in score and you know roughly what they are. As you can see, just in the fixture is Son and Kane. I would argue their individual data isn't good enough, their team data isn't good enough, and therefore you are basically only captaining Kane and Son because of the fixture, right? Which isn't ideal, because then you could basically captain Armstrong or you could captain Tony. You really want more than just the fixture. And I haven't seen, even in the two games that Kane and Son played under Conte, I haven't necessarily seen enough to make me confident enough to go against the likes of a Salah or a Ronaldo. I just haven't seen quite enough there. And I'll be honest, I am slowly putting myself off of captaining these two because it is literally just the fixture. It's that leap of faith that Conte will finally start to get them going and that Spurs will overturn Leeds, which I don't know that I'm confident enough about. You've then got three players who I would say have good individual data and good team data. And I would argue that Salah and Foden are potentially unlucky not to get into the all three category because Salah, the data for Arsenal hasn't been great across the season, but because it's been quite good recently, it slightly put me off putting him right in the middle. And Foden's almost the opposite because Everton's data has been pretty good across the season, it does slightly put me off, and I maybe think it's just been a little blip for Everton. But again, their data has been really poor recently, so you could argue that Foden could go in the middle as well. But because I'm not quite sure on that, I've put Foden, Salah, and Antonio in that part of the Venn diagram where their individual data is good and their team data is good as well. They don't quite have the fixture for me to put them dead in the middle where you could say they have all three. So what you can see is that lovely face in the middle is Ronaldo. And you might say that the team data for Manchester United has been quite poor recently, but it's actually still been all right. It's not been fantastic. But I would argue that when you looked at the individual data, Ronaldo had the highest non-penalty expected goals, which was pretty good. The fixture is fantastic. Watford have been probably the poorest defence out of all the options here. And Manchester United's underlying data isn't bad enough for me to say that they don't have the team data to support that. So I'll be honest, in my opinion, if I could captain anyone in the game this week, if I was on a free hit, I would have Ronaldo in my team and I would be giving him the armband. However, you could argue that there is not enough evidence to suggest not to captain Salah. And I do think this is quite a nice way to look at it at the moment, is that Salah is the best player in world football at the moment. Arguably, maybe Benzema has been pretty good as well, maybe Lewandowski. But you could say Salah's probably the best player in world football at the moment. You should really need something quite convincing to say not to captain Salah. And when you realise how good Liverpool are, how good his underlying stats are, and the fact that Arsenal aren't like the best team in the league defensively, you could argue that there's not enough evidence to captain anyone other than Salah. You could argue that Ronaldo's stats aren't good enough. Ronaldo's Manchester United's underlying stats aren't good enough, and that the fixture isn't like a Norwich. You could argue that all of that isn't enough to suggest not captaining Salah. There is no right answer to this. After having spoken for a long time about all of these different things, there is no set answer. We're trying to predict the future. It's virtually impossible. What I would say is that for me, because I don't own Ronaldo, I own Kane. I might own Son. So let's say I own one of the Spurs boys. I'm not seeing enough for me when I'm doing this research and thinking about it truly in my heart. I'm not seeing enough for me to convince me to go against Salah. So for me, my armband is currently on Salah, but I do promise you, if I owned Ronaldo, I would be giving the armband to Ronaldo. So it's up to you. If you own Ronaldo, potentially go for him. If you've watched my videos for a while, Nana Raptor, my nan plays FPL. She's over the age of 80. She's fantastic. She's ranked 60k at the moment. She's brilliant. She wants to captain Salah for the reason that I just said. She went, no, I'm not going against Salah at the moment. She owns Ronaldo, but she wants to captain Salah. So I don't have an issue with that. If you own Ronaldo, but you still don't see enough to captain anyone other than Salah, that's fine. I think Phil Foden is a really outside punt. I'm just not ever sure enough that he's going to start. And I don't think the fixture's amazing enough to target it above someone like a Ronaldo against Watford. So that's my final opinion on it. If I had to rank them, I would say just about Ronaldo at the top, then Salah, then Son and Kane, just because the fixture's really nice and they've had good underlying data in the past. And then I would say maybe Foden, then Antonio. And then you've got the three defenders in Trent, Cancelo and James. I just don't really like captaining defenders because if they lose the clean sheet, you're relying on a defender to score an attacking return. And whilst they do have some good data, I'm not sure that I'm ever confident enough in that. So that is the final conclusion. I'd captain Ronaldo. Really like Salah though. I'll probably be going with Salah in my personal opinion at the time of recording this. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 12 captaincy video, my first ever video dedicated to captaincy. Please let me know down below, what did you think of it? Did you think it was overkill? Would you prefer me just chucking this in the Game Week preview video and just spending 10 minutes on it? Or do you like the more detailed approach where we take a look at different maps? We take a look at more options rather than just a few. I thought it was quite fun. And like I said, I can't do this every week due to work commitments and time, etc. But in weeks where we've got a little bit of time and Salah isn't the clear-cut captaincy option and there are other choices, I definitely think it'd be pretty cool to explore in a little bit more detail. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. As I said, I'm going to try and hit 10K before 2022. I'm on the road to 10K. I'm going to keep pushing it. I won't push it during the videos too much, but at the start and the end, I will a little bit. So if you're new to this channel or you just haven't subscribed before, please do subscribe. I appreciate it so much. And yeah, it just gives me something to focus on while stuff in my life isn't going well. I can focus my attention on trying to hit 10K. So I appreciate you being here, watching, liking, commenting, subscribing. I appreciate all of your support so much. You guys are genuinely the best and you make my life so much better just by having you guys to interact with and create content for. So I appreciate you very much. Until next time, guys, best of luck for Game Week 12. I hope you smash it. I hope you have a load of green arrows. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.